Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another dark evening in the UK, which is edging towards spring. And we have another episode of the Peccadillo Sofa Club for you. This week, we are meeting with our friends from Into Film. They're the go-to guys for film in education. Let's take a look at some of the work they do.
For many of our children, it's the first time they've come to the cinema. They haven't had the experience before.
This is my first time in the cinema and it's very exciting.
To have film, to have the visuals enhances their opportunities.
I think the main message of The Greatest Showman is to show that everyone is equal, celebrating humanity with all the different acts he had on his show.
We love the circus, we love the singing, and we love the dancing.
This is probably the best venue to screen the film, like when you make a film for this generation really, and trying to instill some positivity and hope into them.
It was very inspiring and it showed that us kids should get our voice heard and tell the adults that we need to do something.
It gives them an opportunity to see representations that are different, so alternative representations of sexuality, of ethnicity, and this is really important in terms of building their cultural capital.
Stop doing all this Instagramming and selfies and all of that, be unique, be different, stand out.
It just gives a one-on-one direct contact with the industry. I think it's amazing.
I think events like these are important to children, especially around this community, because certain things like this don't go on very often.
It's been lovely to see how engaged they were in the film with all their friends, and that's a magical experience.
Next up, to the cinema.
It's giving the children the opportunities to experience things that they may not have been able to access before due to their specific sensory needs.
Seeing other schools doing the same as they are doing gives them the confidence then to go to the cinema, which is a huge barrier for our children.
The medium of film is quite an engaging thing for students to be able to do, and I think particularly with the emotive aspects, to be able to gain the empathy and the understanding of these complex issues.
It has been amazing.
So there you go, some great work. Tonight we're very happy to be joined by Alexis, Amy, Stephen and Joe, who are all part of the Into Film team. Welcome, guys.
Hey.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
So, film obviously for children and young people is amazing. I remember when I was a kid, I was absolutely obsessed with watching films. I just watched them on repeat, just over and over again. It's interesting, the trailer you showed just then talks about autism. I was an autistic kid. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know till a couple of years ago. So I spent my entire childhood watching films because they were a great way to find out and try to understand all these other people that weren't autistic. So they're a fantastic kind of manual for me to understand humanity. So I just sat in my room for a lot of the time watching movies. For kids today, obviously films, we've gone from everybody watching films in cinemas, then watching films in their home, on the telly together. Now we're moving into a world where people can watch films on their phones, on their laptops, on their iPads, in a much more singular environment. But obviously the language of film seems embedded in us now as a culture. And it seems that you go into schools and try and bring some conscious understanding of what tools people have in them.
Yes, we do. So perhaps that's just a quick intro to what we do. So the trailer you saw there was for our Into Film Festival that takes place every November, and those are kind of free cinema screenings across the country for schools to access. And we have normally, I think it's about 3,000 we have. So that's our kind of cinema offering, but our kind of day-to-day film watching comes through Into Film Plus. So that's our schools streaming service. So that's a free service that schools can access that provides them with kind of free and legal access to a whole range of feature films. So, from mainstream blockbusters to short films, documentaries, archive, and that kind of thing. With our audiences, we we work with 5 to 19-year-olds. We access for 5 to 19-year-olds, and there's a whole range there. So for some of them, it's their first experience watching narrative film at all, and then we go right through to kind of the future film critics and filmmakers of the future. So that's the general intro to what we do.
It's quite interesting because obviously lots of kids now in their pockets will have the ability, have the technology to make films, which is just an absolutely remarkable place for people to be in. So I've watched some of the short films that you've made online on your YouTube channel of some of the students have made. How do you go about encouraging and making the students feel like they can access the film world and they can make a film?
You want to say that?
Well, I'll go in terms of the classroom use. So I'm the training manager at Into Film, and basically we work to upskill teachers in doing filmmaking, watching films meaningfully with their students in the classroom. So right from like Joe says, from 5 to 19, giving teachers the confidence to pick up even just their own smartphones or tablets or DSLRs, whatever, to pick them up themselves, because sometimes that can be the barrier to encouraging young people to make films, because the adults might need to facilitate it but they don't know how. So we're upskilling them in making films, and then they're going off and running whole lessons with their students to make films about the things that matter most to them, or linking it into the curriculum in lots of different ways, or making them in their own time. And then, like you've noticed, getting them to submit the films to us. We have a Film of the Month competition every single month, and we watch the films that the kids send over, pick our favourites, and pop them up on YouTube. So they've got their own streaming platform, really, their own place to screen their films.
Yeah, and it seems some of the information you sent me, the kind of classroom support information about certain films that you've shown, it seems like you need to educate students not only that they have the power to make films and to understand the films they watch. And you talked about empathy in that opening trailer, to build up people's ability to empathize across different narratives. But I suppose a big part of the education is teaching the students that they have the option of what they point the camera at. And I suppose the short films that you see are a kind of proof of the pudding of that choice system.
I can speak on that a little bit, actually. It's kind of fascinating to see what subjects we see pop up in Film of the Month, or that are being made by young people. It's pretty obvious that filmmakers are going to, young filmmakers are just going to ape at first a lot of the things they're seeing in the filmmakers that they love. I mean, we just saw The Fabelmans come out, and the most famous film director in the world was very clear about his kind of influences in the early part of his kind of filmmaking journey. And it's exactly the same with young filmmakers making films with their iPhones, or making films at a really kind of primitive level by today's standards. They're gonna, if they don't see stories that they want to tell represented on the big screen, then they're not going to tell those stories themselves. They're just going to think that the cinema is not the place for that. So, hopefully teachers that do teach their students how to make films are also showing them films that are giving them a really wide kind of view of what cinema has to offer. And we do see that pop up in our Film of the Month. Every now and then you'll get something just that you didn't expect, something that really seems kind of left field. And that's when you get kind of excited, when those ideas kind of seep in.
Yeah, so I suppose that's when you move from that state of imitation of a filmmaker into then adapting it to their own narrative, their own lives, their own points of interest, and the skills becoming transferable.
Yeah, we want both teachers and the students to understand that there's a place for that in their education. This doesn't have to be only something that they're doing in their own time because they like watching films, they like making films. It's actually a really important part of them accessing their learning consolidating that understanding and sharing their opinions with with the whole world, possibly.
Yeah, and obviously the history of film is littered with geeks who who found a way to just go off with their mates into forests or into houses and make weird little tiny films. Do you see that they're it seems to me we're ripe for a big rhythm change in the industry of new young filmmakers who grow up with cameras in their pockets, and that a different style of film may come out of that in the future. Are you getting intimations of that with the work you're doing?
It's hard to say. I mean, certainly, I think young people are becoming much more, confident about putting themselves on screen and expressing themselves kind of confidently in terms of their identity and things like that. So I think there's a change in that. In terms of filmmaking styles, it's hard to say.
I was just like laughing. No, sorry, I was just thinking in my head and laughing to myself because when we're teaching filmmaking skills, we're trying to encourage the students to use landscape aspect ratio, right, rather than portrait, which is what they're used to doing on their phone. But at the same time, if they're making the films with their phones, they're being displayed on their phones and so on. Perhaps they should be using portrait, but we are trying to encourage them to sort of still consider like the true art form of film, which is in landscape. But yeah, that's.
And do you, at any point, are you able to have them interact with physical film and the kind of random complexities that introduces into the process?
Go on, Joe.
Oh no, yeah.
Well, what do you mean? Just to clarify.
Just because obviously, if you point a digital camera at something, you're going to get a pretty precise representation on the screen of what the finished product is, or then you can alter that in a certain way to your own tastes. But if you just buy a disposable camera from a pharmacy and you point it and you shoot it, you don't know what's going to come out of that thing. And I think that was one of the initial romantic attractions for a lot of any cinematographer I've worked with wants to shoot on film. And you constantly have to cut them at the knees because you don't have the extra 25 grand they're asking for. That kind of chemical response to film rather than just a point and shoot, digital grabs things, whereas film, chemical film reacts to things. It's I wonder how that sits in the narrative now of the technology.
Well, most young people don't really realise that film existed as a physical medium, particularly kind of under 11s. I remember a couple of years ago, we do a lot of work with archive film with the BFI, and we had a workshop at the BFI around Victorian film, and as part of that, Bryony, who runs the archive there, brought along a film reel. And it absolutely blew their minds, and what we did, it was fabulous. It was going around. We had it wrapping around the whole cinema, so it was just kind of going around, kind of through all of the rows, and they'd never seen anything like that. So that's watching stuff streaming and digitally is all they know. So introducing them just in that very basic way to film as a physical form was a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
And we actually, in our resources and our training, we actually go, when we talk about animation, we go right back to Edward Muybridge and the sort of, the beginning of film, which came from, lots of still images put together really quickly, just so they can get an understanding of where it all began right at the very beginning.
Is that the horse? The horse?
Yeah.
And the tripwires to take each frame. Great.
I've noticed as well with looking at a lot of the films that are being made by young people is they're far more likely to kind of imitate. We have this amazing film. I wish I could remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it was a young person that made a silent comedy. It was about 7 minutes long, and he had used digital filters applied to the film to make it look like it was shot on film. He definitely hadn't, because it was all handmade, it was all handheld, and he'd set up all of these things in his own house. But it really got close to the style. He even knew to put the makeup on and everything to make it look as though he was from that era. And seeing things like that really makes you, it reminds you that young people are watching these kind of films. They're watching films from the 20s and the 30s and kind of really being inspired by them and making them in 2022, 2023, which is pretty insane.
Well, I suppose it's a bit like how suddenly you'll get a recurrence of certain writers because they'll go out of copyright. When the copyright of these old films go out, they can watch all these things on YouTube for free without having subscriptions or paying for anything. And then that will naturally just feed into their aesthetic. It's fascinating. So one of the reasons why Peccadillo are so keen on you guys is obviously that you're taking queer stories into schools. So let's have a look at this is a clip from interviewing some of the people from a piece called Coming Out.
I think kids are spoiled with how many role models they have. Love Simon especially. If I'd have watched that when I was a kid, I would have come out years before.
It's really nice to meet you, Stephen. I really enjoyed watching Coming Out, which is a compilation of videos about young people talking about their experiences of coming out as gay to their parents and to their friends. Some of the questions people asked those coming out really stuck in my mind. I thought of asking, what does coming out mean to your life?
It means confidence. So before I came out, I was really sort of in on myself. So I was really shy, really timid. I wouldn't make a lot of friends because I was afraid of sort of exposing any sort of part of myself. But now that I'm out, I feel like I've got nothing to hide anymore. I can make friends now. I can be open with them. I can, within reason, say what I like. And yeah, it's really freeing coming out and actually being yourself.
I knew all along.
You knew?
Mm-hmm.
You knew this whole time? Mm-hmm. Do you remember your journey of being part of the film? Do you remember the director contacting you and about how he described the vision he had for the documentary?
Yeah, so this was, I think about 2 years after I came out through the video. This was when I was at university, and I was studying film at the time, and the director sort of came to me. I thought, oh my God, it's an action movie director. I'm actually talking to an action movie director. And he said to me, he wants to make a video about coming out. He wants to share everyone's experiences through coming out videos on YouTube. I thought, well, great. I spent my entire childhood looking at these videos. And I thought, it's almost an honor for me to join their ranks and show everyone that it's okay to be gay through these YouTube videos. And yeah, I thought, this is amazing. I have to be a part of it. And yeah, he sort of held my hand throughout the whole process, told me exactly what the film is going to, when it's going to like come out. And yeah, so it was really cool working with Denny.
Great. So when you look on your website, you've got such a range of films, and you can search the films through subject matter to do with like what the film is, who the film's suitable for, what the film addresses. So obviously, when you're taking queer stories into schools, I presume, and let me know if I'm wrong, but I presume there's going to be some friction from certain avenues, because obviously legally everybody can be gay as they like, but culturally we also wish to be tolerant as a society and allow a diverse range of viewpoints. But then also parents just really want to be in charge of what their children are taught. So how have you found a way to negotiate through that territory?
Well, I mean, we give the teachers the choice, so we don't so much take films into schools. So we have a lot of LGBT content on our streaming platform, but it sits within a much wider range of content. So the teachers are choosing to watch and engage that content, that content before they show it to their young people. So it's very rare that we get any kind of pushback on that, and I think there would have pushback from parents that would go to the schools. I think it would be very unlikely to kind of come to us. I mean, what we do with all of our stuff is we try and just use film as the basis and the stimulus to start conversations and represent it. So, what we, Stephen and I and the rest of the people on our team is we provide film guides around every film that we have on the platform, and it's just ways to stimulate discussion and conversation with teachers, with their children in the classroom after the film. What we don't want to do is tell anybody what to think or how to think. We want to use film as the basis to get young people talking and hear what they have to say and their points of view. And that's true of LGBTQ film, but all of our titles really.
So you've designed a particularly diverse library from which then each school can decide how they engage and tailor everything to their own.
Yeah, exactly. And what we find tends to happen is that they will start, because a lot of it is, through extracurricular film clubs as well as in the classroom. So what they tend to do, they will start with, something that young people will know, a Black Panther or something like that, getting them interested, getting them engaged, and then using that, and then, I hate the phrase taking them on a journey, but it's that kind of stuff, but then saying, okay, well, you've like that, why not try this? Why not try, etc. And, let's try a documentary, let's try a piece of queer cinema, let's try a foreign language film. It's that kind of thing.
But what we're also trying to do is speak to them using the language that they know. We know how to talk to teachers, right? A lot of us are ex-teachers ourselves. I'm an ex-teacher, or been working in this area for a long time, and we're making sure that they understand that it's okay to show these films in school. It's okay to have these conversations, and we're telling them what what curricular subjects they feed into. So, for example, in England, it would be PSHE, citizenship, relationships and sex education, which has been a great one for us to be able to, use this as a vehicle to, speak directly to young people about their identity and the problems that they might be facing both internally and in the sort of wider context of the school with their peers or at home or anything like that. So it's creating an avenue for them to feel safe, and when they're exploring character in these films, they're able to sort of have conversations about the characters, and they might actually be having conversations about their own feelings, but they're doing it at a remove. It's making it safe for them to talk about these things, but with Tom who's in the film and
that's really interesting, because you can imagine that I remember when I watched films in class at my school, everybody in the room would be having their own private journey in the collective if they watch the film, and then obviously when you discuss it or reflect on it together, it can be quite exposing to discuss your own private kind of response to the film. And it seems like a lot of your work is to facilitate that and to create a way to kind of have those conversations and have that abstraction of personal experience.
Yeah, as well. Last year we ran quite a big campaign on Interfilm Plus for our LGBTQ History Month. And with that, we did it. That was a lot of research as well, and we found from the charity Just Like Us actually did some research and found that only a third of teachers felt comfortable discussing LGBTQ topics in the classroom. So we saw that as a way we could work with leading charities and organizations, and we actually created some exclusive content with our program and our films to try and help bring those discussions into the classroom, and have it as a talking point with their students, because it can be quite difficult for educators and teachers, especially with some of them have lived through Section 28. So I think that's what we try and.
Yeah, I was one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that to me the idea of discussing being gay openly in class is a very novel experience. I just can't imagine what that would be like. So I'm a creative, so my viewpoint of things when it comes to film is to make things as complicated and challenging as possible. Obviously, you guys are working at the other end of the factory, where you're trying to use the films and communicate the ideas in the films and make the films as accessible as possible. So, Stephen, how do you go about that kind of negotiation of complex narratives meeting clear communication?
Yeah, look, the thing about Tomboy is that it's a very complicated film wrapped up in a simple kind of narrative and package. And I think that's what has always made it so enticing to me, but also something that I think makes it really useful in a classroom environment, because this isn't a film with a clear message. It's not a film that you can say, oh, this is the message of Tomboy, and this is what everyone needs to learn from it, end of lesson. It's the kind of film that brings up, conversations about what gender is, and is it okay that the character in this film pretends to be another gender? Like, is that all right? And what should they have done, or what could they have done better, or how are they feeling? All those kind of questions are so useful for a classroom environment. The worst thing anybody could do is prevent young people from having these conversations, so they never get to answer these kind of questions. And I think Tomboy just really makes it easy for young people to start having those conversations. I think it's a very, very important film.
Yeah, and I think maybe because of the age of the main character, it kind of allows some of the complexity of the story to be synthesized a bit, and allow everybody as an audience member to view it a little bit more easily than if the character was older with jobs and all the other confusions that come into life. So I've taken a look at some of the supporting material you've sent out with Tomboy, and I found the work you did about camera angles was really interesting, and about status in the film.
Yeah, so just using clips from the film, we created like a teacher. So with every resource, we create like a teacher's note and an accompanying PowerPoint presentation, which is just up now. So that just using clips from the film, we can discuss like the different like power levels and identity through the camera work angles, and it just to present like equality and power and gender identity. And we also, within this resource, specifically look at like the Gender Equality Act, and like what that means, just through clips of the film. And there's also an interview with the director. So yeah, it's just like quite a few discussion points around the film and the film's themes.
And I think I get the feeling when I was thinking about the work you were doing that I was trying to remember what I was like at that age when I was watching films. And all I can really remember is that I was really, really complex. And I think that everybody at that age secretly is. And films seem to have a way, narratives seem to have a way to break through some of that complexity and reach in and kind of touch us in a way that maybe just autobiographical information about other people doesn't. How some of the narratives, obviously, I suppose you have to be careful of allowing too much enigma in there, because you do have a social responsibility when you're selecting these films. So how do you negotiate this?
How do you mean, Chris? Sorry.
So obviously you want the widest reach as possible, and you want the films to represent as wide an internal world as possible. But obviously the more interpretable a person's actions become, then the more enigmatic their motivations might be. And it seems that you must have to walk a line of trying to find films that really sit somewhere neatly on that enigmatic spectrum.
Yes, I suppose. I mean, to be honest, I've never thought of it in that way before. We're just we're just after, we just pretty, just look for great stories. What we do is we watch every film very carefully in terms of its content, and we will kind of, obviously we abide by BBFC certification and things like that, but we'll also watch and look at that very specifically in terms of age ratings as well, and say, okay, this may be technically a 12 certificate, but its themes are pretty mature and pretty complex and pretty adult. They're not designed, a 12-year-old is not going to engage or enjoy this. So we do a lot of that kind of stuff. So we're sensitive to the content in that way. But in terms of I don't know, Stephen.
Stephen.
Yeah, it is. Like Joe said, we tend to look at these films and think of them in terms of suitability and understanding. And I think what you were talking about, Chris, is enigmatic films and open-ended films can certainly be a struggle for teachers if they look at this thing and they can't quite figure out what it's trying to say. But into film, and especially the last couple of years since we got a streaming service, we've done our best to not show these films in a vacuum. We've done our best to kind of give teachers as much information as we can about what's going on in the films. Personally, I think that if young people in a classroom are told something about a film, I think when we haven't really truly done our job properly, I think if young people watch something and they're given that, what we have in our film guides is something called discussion points, not questions and answers, but discussion points, because what we want to do is stimulate discussion. We don't want to kind of stifle anybody's opinions or anything. And I think that, yes, a film needs to have, clarity to it, but I think a little bit of mystery is always a good thing in the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, from a teacher's perspective as well, we love comprehension. The amazing thing about using film in schools is how fantastic it is to almost put something fairly enigmatic up and decode that information. They do this in literacy with book texts, and we're bringing them film, and we're saying, pick it apart, use all of these elements of film and create your own understanding. What is the director trying to say? There is no right or wrong answer, actually. It's about you using your imagination and then using your reasoning skills to explain why you think the certain things that you think. So we have this thing called the 3 C's and 3 S's to help young people decode film, but then also use them to encode film and make their own film. So it's like camera, color, character, story, setting, and sound. So, if there's some enigmatic things going on there, then if we get their detective skills to work and they can try and work it out and then have conversations about all of those things. But I think really, as long as we're sticking, we don't feature 18 films, it's sort of 15 and under, as long as we're sticking to that. Right, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, and I suppose is there it's because obviously Enigma lives in the world of myth as well. So a lot of the films you've got on there or a lot of the films that kids are watching these days are very mythologically charged. And so that those skills that you're talking about must be put to good use with those films. Okay, we're going to take a little intermission now. We're going to have a look at a trailer of a film that is out right now in the cinemas. Let's take a look.
Te aluna na lele beshi go benga china lenga na lo yigo chilide.
Machi lona nagi Mrs. Soda Marakatule lewe chemale suila. Machi lobjo de dila. Ya na khishbu.
Tinga gidan ira membe. Ana kadebe pechte na mashe. Ama juni aja.
Chule tindibe. Machi allo solo. Shiyen topsu. Ya chigi ki
Cha cha janya.
Cha cha janya. Wala pembe ko nomidi na jenda alo solo namzam tension ni digala. Lebe nanga chita chikamiga yala.
Inteni mi machiri ji khap maung pai mi. Lebe na zom chilo kachi ma jom mi di kachi na mo.
Welcome back, everyone. So that film is out right now in cinemas across the country. And Joe, I think you mentioned that you did previews of this film.
Yeah, so we're very lucky. Had a fabulous relationship with Peccadillo for years. So during our festival last November, we were able to secure half a dozen previews of Lunana, which is a wonderful film. I really, really recommend it, around the country. And yeah, again, free access for stalls. And, the type of film that, with the best will in the world, is going to be difficult to get a young person into a cinema to watch, or it might not be traditionally playing anywhere near where they would go to watch a film, because we find that there are barriers to accessing independent film for young people, and a lot of the work we do is to try and remove those barriers, and we work with our colleagues in indie venues around the country to do that. So no, I was really, really chuffed that we were able to show that film and get that in front of young audiences, particularly a preview. And just again, it's that film is all about kind of broadening people's cultural horizons and developing their empathy and things like that. And Lunana was a terrific example of that.
Great.
Yeah, and I was just going to say as well, with something like Lunana and getting to show it in cinemas, you mentioned right at the start, Chris, that you used to watch a lot of films in your bedroom at home when you were younger.
Yeah, VHS tapes. Great
yeah, and you're absolutely right that like the methods of young people watching film is changing all the time. But when we do put the festival on, or when we do our spring screenings, which are going on right now, actually, I host a few of those things, and the attitude that the students have coming into a cinema and watching something is so different to watching something at home. You can tell they see it as an experience, and hopefully we can be a kind of conduit for the kind of films they're seeing, like Lunana, like Joe just mentioned. But when you were younger and you were watching these films, where were you? Who was curating those for you? Where were you finding out about those?
Yeah, so well, I grew up in Swindon, which wasn't exactly a cultural hotbed. So the main way I found out about film was through magazines. And then I'd have to wait for them to come on VHS. We had kind of large cinemas, but they were just showing you blockbusters, really. So yeah, in my youth, it was all just a waiting game. You were waiting for the film to come out, waiting for it to finish its window at cinemas.
I still get DVDs.
Yeah, I think what makes
I still get DVDs. Actually.
I still got DVDs.
Yeah. I think it's quite nice.
So do I.
You mentioned the experience of going to cinema, Stephen. It reminds me of a couple of events we've done in the past. So we often get guest speakers involved from partners and things like that. And it's fascinating. There was a film a few years ago, I don't remember it, The Pass, which is about the time with Russell Tovey, about the two queer footballers. And we put that on, and it was the kids were really engaged, teenagers, but teenagers will be teenagers. And there's a scene when the two guys start kissing, the cinema just kind of erupted into giggles and kind of just general, poor behaviour. And then we had a gentleman from an organisation called Blackout UK came to talk afterwards, and he was there and he witnessed that, and he just kind of called them out, and we had a really kind of positive but kind of frank conversation with them. Why were you laughing? What was it that was funny about those two guys kissing? And that turned something that was kind of, oh God, this is really embarrassing that these teenagers are immature and are reacting in this way, into actually a really kind of constructive and worthwhile conversation. And there's numerous examples of that throughout the festival. And I think it's a really interesting environment for that.
Yeah, that's an interesting example of socialization through film, because it happens in theatres as well. Yeah. People will be given permission to laugh on certain subjects or to find certain subjects, and it becomes a communication among the audience as they watch the experience. I remember seeing Behind the Candelabra, and towards the end of the film, when they were showing Liberace very ill with HIV, a couple of people really laughed, but in a very uncomfortable way. And there was a really strong reaction in the audience saying, like, no, this isn't, it's not funny. And it was a really interesting moment of education and a shared moment between the audience. So I think still getting people into cinemas is vital. So we're going to take a little look now at something a project you recently ran, which was the Young Reporters Project. And here's one of your young reporters interviewing an old friend of mine, Alex Lauder.
Sort of, yeah, a bit in love with her. She's amazing.
What's the first thing you do when you get back home from making a film?
I take a long shower, I think, and stop myself from sort of post-morteming everything wrong that I think I've done for the last couple of months on this. Move on with my life.
What are your favourite foods, both off and on set?
Favourite foods? That's a hard question. Can you ask the next one?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you look at first, the film or the book?
I suppose I'd love to say that I read the book first, but I remember seeing the TV series of Brideshead Revisited and then reading the book and actually sort of enjoying the TV series more. The music and the sort of rigid, very English performances. And, yeah, so yeah, it depends.
Which actors have you most enjoyed working with?
I loved working with Juliet Stevenson in Departure and Phoenix Brossard as well, and I feel very lucky that I got to work with them and now can sort of send them a text too and have a coffee with them. At the moment I'm shooting a film with another French actor called Pauline Etienne. She's just amazing and I'm sort of, yeah, a bit in love with her. She's amazing. So, and we are going back to shoot that, carry on shooting that tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to seeing it already.
Cool. What's the most bizarre thing to ever happen to you on set?
I shot a film in Christmas time last year called Freak Show, and there's a moment where my character is playing guitar in a giant purple shoe, and he's surrounded by these people pushing smaller purple shoes on in trolleys, and that was a really surreal moment that was meant to happen and part of the story. But looking back at it now, hopefully people will see this film and understand what I'm talking about, but that, as an idea, was very strange.
What's a film that's made the biggest impact on your life?
Andrew, the director of Departure, is laughing at me in the corner. Departure? No. It's sort of quote off by heart, Matilda by Danny DeVito.
Can you give me a quote?
Oh, no, it's
Now that you've said
embarrassing. I can really quote it from beginning to end. That was a film that maybe hasn't changed my life, but has. I could still watch now, and I know I'd love it. I might go home and watch that now.
I think if you're going to spend a day naked, surrounded by strangers, then underwater kind of makes sense in a way, because you are in literally the other space. You are somewhere else.
We'll start packing tomorrow, properly.
We live in the house by the river. It's like a holiday house.
Ok, cool, moi c'est Clément.
So there you go. They're talking about the film Departure, which is another Peccadillo release. You can all go and watch that now. Obviously, I've worked as an actor. One of the things that's tricky about being an actor is that you're encouraged to live a life as if you're very different from everybody else, and you're a kind of rarefied object over here on a red carpet. Unfortunately, that's not very helpful for people if they feel that they want to get into the industry, or they want to be the people making the films, writing the films, working with the films like you guys do. So what do you think we need to do to keep demystifying the film world and keep opening it up to new generations and new voices?
Start really, really young. You know, start as young as you can. You know, with your kids at home, your brothers, sisters, you know, your friends' kids. If any teachers are watching this, like the kids in your classroom, like get a camera in their hand at age 5 or younger, and just kind of keep doing that, getting behind the camera as well, screenwriting, costume design, colorist work and so on. Just sort of there are so many roles in the film industry. One of the things that we love doing with kids as well is like playing the credits, which no one watches anymore, and playing the credits and just seeing like how many roles there are, how many actors are in the film that they've seen, or how many the thousands of different jobs that they have, and all of them are accessible to them. And it's about encouraging them to understand that like everything they do in life is about building transferable skills. Everything they do in school or at home, or the hobbies that they have, these are all skills that can sort of go into their career when they're older, and they can have that career in the film industry. It's not something just for other people over there.
Yeah, you're right, and it's the range of jobs that we want to highlight. Yes, every young person who loves film wants to be a writer or a director, and that's great, and we don't discourage that, of course. But we go to a lot of effort to highlight and introduce other departments, sound, grit, whatever it might be, and we find that they're actually some of our kind of most successful events, whether that's in person or online. It's somebody who, for want of a better term, feels normal to them, that is just a regular person on the street. And it's not, yes, I mean, it's great if we can get a big celebrity in, and that's fabulous, and that's really, really exciting, but they often get a lot more out of talking to the sound guy or the camera operator or whoever it might be, and talking about them, because then the industry feels a little bit more real to them and a little bit more accessible. And then particularly because we work across the UK, as I say, so if we did, in a kind of remote part of the country where the film world in London feels an absolute, universe away, if we can say, oh, look, here's this guy who came from this town, and look the work he's doing, that helps inspire young people and makes them think, okay, well, if they can do it, why can't I do it?
Yeah, just Joe's absolutely right. As an example, we had Nina Hartston last year for the Interfilm Festival come to a school in Whitechapel. She is the sound designer for films such as Bohemian Rhapsody and Moon Age Daydream. And she brought her Academy Award to this school in Whitechapel and set it down in front of all these kids. And they were all like a little bit confused because they only ever saw like actors and directors, people they knew with Academy Awards. And she came in and talked about, from the very basics, about how sound works. And it was fascinating to me, and the kids were blown away by the idea of like ADR and like Foley work and special effects. They had no idea that it wasn't just a point and shoot game. They didn't know there were all these elements to it. And speaking to the students afterwards, they were like, I want to learn more about this. I want to actually find out how this works. And for me, that's much more exciting than seeing a kid say, like, I want to be an actor. To see somebody truly be mystified by how film works is a really exciting thing.
But also to encourage them to understand that it's worth paying for films. It's worth actually going to the cinema and watching them, or if you can't do that, then stream them legally. There are so many people that deserve to get paid, like regular people that deserve their cut of the pay. It's not just all of the big superstars and their millions of pounds.
Yeah, it's a difficult edifice to get beyond with the film industry, this kind of very dominant commercialized red carpet world, and underneath all the real craftspeople, and I think it's the craft that keeps people really interested over the long term. The glitz and the glamour comes and goes, but it's the craft that will really sustain you through those cold, dark winters when you can't pay your mortgage. Okay, great. So obviously, you guys are forging ahead into the next few years. What do you have on your minds going forward?
Well, we've got lots of stuff we're definitely continuing. That's been, we've been doing a really good job of for many years, and so we're going to carry on doing that. So that's our sort of, what I can talk about anyway. The work with teachers, training teachers up in in film watching, like good film watching and filmmaking, creating resources for them to use directly with their young people in the classroom, encouraging them to watch a diverse range of films in the classroom. I can give you a sneak preview of a course that we've got coming out hopefully later this year. It's all about relationships and sex education and ensuring there is a diverse representation of all different genders and sexualities and whatnot in there. Interviews with intimacy coordinators as well, so they can understand how sex scenes are carefully guided, and so
not
on.
sexy, never sexy.
And then anyone else?
Carrying on with our streaming service, so into Film Plus. So what we do a lot of is also kind of trying to acquire exclusive content. We haven't really talked about short films here, but we do a hell of a lot with short film into film because, well, first of all, they're fantastic films in their own right and shouldn't be treated any differently to feature films, but they're just so much more practical for teachers as well. A feature film will often have to be watched over 4 or 5, maybe even more lessons. A short film, you can get it done and get that conversation in an hour. And so we do a lot of work with that. So we'll be continuing with that. Moving into a lot more on careers as well. So still kind of figuring out what's that's going to look like, but some of the stuff we talked about opening up the industry, particularly outside London and the Southeast, that's going to be an enormous focus for us over the next 3 years. Young filmmakers as well. All of this we're going to be doing more of. What else are we doing, guys?
Amy, can you think of
think
anything?
We're always pretty busy.
Yeah, I think you've covered most of it. Yeah, just like continuing our program, and yeah, bringing expanding into Film Plus, and focus on like young creatives, and a lot more on online delivery of our program as well. Is something that we're going to focus on.
I suppose an amazing thing would be in 10 or 20 years' time that someone that met you guys in a school when they were first being educated goes on and becomes a content creator or a game designer, or if you can see those payoffs in decades to come, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. And we should say, I don't know if we said, but everything for any teachers that are watching in the UK, everything we talked about is entirely free. So
yes, I was going to say that. The streaming service is so great and so valuable for such a valuable resource. You don't have to pay a penny. It's so easy to set up, and it's just one of those things that we put so much effort into to make it easy for teachers to access this content. And that's what we're all about. We don't want to make it difficult. We don't want people to have to jump through hoops. We want them to be able to click a few buttons and end up with resources and films that they can show to multiple people at the same time.
Great. Brilliant. Yeah, I signed up just to give it a go, see what it was like. Obviously, I'm not at school, so I fell at that hurdle. But the system, everything on the website is so easy to engage with. And so there we go. So time for some questions from our live viewers. I'm just my producer, here we are. This is one for Alexia. Do you have physical resources such as cameras, access to post-production equipment, editing software for teachers and students to use?
Well, we work a lot at the point of contact of the teachers. So we're training up the teachers, whether online or face-to-face. It depends what they're learning, really, but we often encourage them to bring their own equipment, because that's what they'll be going back and using. We want to make sure that they're using what they're actually going to be able to use for their students. So it kind of depends where we're going, who we're working with, what level. We might be working with film studies teachers, or teachers of 5-year-olds. But in all of our sessions, all of our filmmaking sessions, we make a film. Won't necessarily be the most amazingly polished long thing ever, but and we'll get them editing those as well, so they can take a few skills away. We're going to be working a lot more with film teachers soon as well. That's sort of part of the new remit for the next couple of years. So we're definitely going to be working more on that level then.
Yeah, because I suppose the lo-fi aspect of the thing you have in your pocket, the camera you have in your pocket, there's a great history of film with people making films lo-fi. Obviously, some of these films you won't show in schools. John Waters, things like that. Early Lars von Trier films, obviously very, very interesting how you can just make a film with the lowest possible standards and it still stands up.
We show the original Hairspray. We do that, and that's always really popular. But the rest of his
and we have
a bit.
We have Tangerine as
Tangerine,
well. That was shot on all on iPhone, so
Absolutely.
that was part of our program last year.
Yeah, it's fantastic because I feel like as a person who has worked in film, we're still waiting for that real revolution of the technology to destroy the need for these huge budgets, but that's yet to come. Okay, the next question: has it been difficult to get foreign films worked into your programs, especially films with subtitles?
Yes, it's fair to say it can be challenging. There's definitely an appetite for teachers. So we do a lot with modern foreign language teachers, so specifically French, Spanish, and German. They are after that. Sometimes it's more challenging to get the rights for them in the first place. So, for example, we get a lot of requests for Spanish language content, but there's actually, and we have our Motivar films on the catalogue and one or two others, but there's not actually much Spanish language content distributed in the UK. So that's a continuing challenge. In terms of getting young people watching it, generally not actually. Young people are pretty kind of down with subtitles now, and it's much less alien to them. I think maybe Netflix and things like that have something to do with this. It's much less alien to them than it was to me when I was 11 or 12. So but the barrier is in accessing that content, I think.
Right.
We with our training and resources, we use a lot of short films because there's a shorter narrative to work with, and we're working with a film on that course I mentioned called Signs, and it's actually a gay couple who are signing the whole way through, and there are no subtitles, and actually it's quite nice just trying to sort of being able to read their body language to see what they're saying. We also use a lot of dialogue free short film content because sometimes we just use everything else to help people understand like what's being said.
Yeah, one thing we haven't touched upon is that in classrooms, obviously teachers have a limited amount of time as well, and often these things are being watched in film clubs, or they're being spread across multiple lessons. But one thing we have found is that short films are kind of a really, really great gateway into opening up these conversations. We partnered with Peccadillo before on short films. We have a short film kind of package on Into Film Plus that teachers can access. That's got 5 or 6 shorts that we kind of curated with Peccadillo, and they've always been very popular, and they've always been really diverse as well, which is what we want to tell. There's diverse stories within diversity, and and it's just great that we have those short films to show when teachers only have 10, 15, 20 minutes around their other lessons.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think it's one of the things I've been at the organisation for quite a while now, and it's been really positive to see the kind of change in terms of the films that are released and the films that we're able to get access to. When I first started, in kind of, I started banging the drum for kind of LGBT cinema within the organisation. We had some content, but it, as ever, it tended to focus around white privileged gay men, which, there's a lot of great stories about white privileged gay men, but it's been great to kind of broaden that out and kind of have as inclusive a platform as possible. And so everyone, what we hope is that everyone who's watching the film can see representations of themselves on screen, whoever they are and wherever they come from and whatever their background. And it's been, Peccadillo and others are fantastic about that, and allowing us to access that content and then in turn, put it in front of young audiences, I think it's been really inspiring. I found that.
Brilliant. Amy, any last word from you?
Yeah, I've just seen a question come in of what our favourite queer films are in or out of our film. So yeah, one of mine is Water Lilies. That's probably one of my favourite queer films by Celine Sciamma. I think in school, that I identified that with film a lot when I first saw it, being like a young child and having a lot of feelings and stuff at the time. Yeah, that's one of my favourite films.
Yeah, I think when a film at that age, when a film connects with you, it can be really, really potent.
Yeah, definitely. It can be being younger and not understanding, and then to see it when I'm older, like a grown woman, it was just a bit like, oh wow,
yeah. Mine was My Own Private Idaho. I didn't know why I liked it.
Such a good choice. Such a good choice. I was swept up in that kind of Americana queer stories as well. And one of my favorites is Desert Hearts, which is a lesbian movie from the 80s by Donna Deitch. And it's we don't have that on our catalogue, but it's a beautiful, beautiful film. Out of the ones on our catalogue, we have a film called The Way He Looks on there that I think is worth checking out for sure. It's a kind of fascinating movie. About a queer culture that we don't get to see very often in the UK. So.
Brilliant.
I hosted a screening of Wildhood recently for Into Film, and that was just like you say, sort of diversity within diversity, and like lots of different like clashing identities and trying to work yourself out.
Yeah, I'm going to be reading pick 2. So one of the great ones we've had with Into Film has been Pride, and everything that I've found that such a witty and inspiring and empowering story. I'm also a big film nerd, so I'm going to pick The Celluloid Closet, which is a great documentary about the history of queer representation in film. Made in 1993, so it actually stopped at Philadelphia. One of my favorite films is Philadelphia, but it kind of presents Philadelphia as a kind of utopian ideal of queer representation, that's fascinating to see from a 30 years perspective. But it's still a brilliant film, and there's some amazing clips, particularly from silent film. So that's my pick.
Great. Well, film continues to be a magical medium. And keep up the good work, guys. Thanks so much for joining us tonight and for giving us a little tour of your activities.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Our next show is coming this very Friday, you lucky creatures. You're going to get a double helping of us this week because we are coming live, that is correct, live and in person from the Flare BFI Film Festival. And that's going to be at the South Bank. We're going to be going live at 12:30 in the afternoon. And if you want to be in the audience, you can come to the BFI and join us live. I'll be there. I'll be hosting. I'll be interviewing some of a handful of the filmmakers who've come to visit us and who are showing their work at the festival. And some of the team from the BFI will be there discussing the work that they're doing at Flare. So join us there. Thanks for the BFI for continuing to support the Peccadillo Sofa Club. And see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.